We do a hot restart, log in. There we go. We can see that now we are following our own feed, and we can see the posts of our own user. And if we want to be egotistical, we can also like our own posts. Welcome everyone to a very exciting video where we will be creating an Instagram clone from the ground up using Flutter and the StreamFeed SDK. This is going to be a big project, but we are going to go over this step by step. And by the end of this video, you should have a decently functional Instagram clone called Streamagram. You should see it on the screen, and there's multiple functionalities that we will be incorporating into our clone. For example, creating user accounts, how you can update profile pictures, how you can add photo posts, or these are referred to as activities in with the terminology of using feeds, and subscribing and unsubscribing to specific users, and then also adding reactions. And a reaction can be a comment or a like. And we're also going to be adding child reactions, so adding a comment to a comment. And with that all said, before we can actually jump into the code, we also need to discuss what an activity feed is exactly. An activity feed is sometimes called a news feed or an activity stream. It is a real-time list of actions performed by users on an app or website. Activity feeds display information from a user's online community, such as likes, follows, comments, posts, and content shares. And the StreamFeed SDK essentially makes this whole process a lot simpler by allowing you to create different feeds. For example, in our app, we're going to be creating two feeds: a user feed where you can post pictures, and then a timeline feed that can subscribe to specific user feeds. And subscribing to a user feed essentially is the same as you following someone on Twitter or you following someone on Instagram. And as we actually discuss these topics, or as we get to the coding parts, I'll elaborate a bit more. Or if you prefer, there's also additional descriptions in the companion blog post that goes into more detail of what an activity feed exactly is, as well as giving you links to additional resources. From a Flutter perspective, this is also going to be a very resource-intensive video, as we will be covering a lot of Flutter topics in this video. Some of the topics is how to neatly structure and organize your code, how to use provider and basic Flutter components to easily manage your application states, theming your app to support light and dark mode. We're going to be doing custom page transitions, hero animations, and how to customize them. When to use implicit animations, and when you should be creating your own explicit animation. And also what to consider from a performance perspective. Maybe that will influence your decision deciding what animation to use. And then some general performance considerations, especially as we'll be creating an Instagram clone, and that's going to be quite intensive with all of the photos that we will be working with. And then also a lot of Flutter layout from basic to advanced tips. And then we'll be creating some extension methods, and also how we can use text editing controllers and focus nodes to create some good looking text input in our application. So with that all said, this is going to be a big one. I do hope you find it helpful. And as always, we welcome any comments and any feedback. Please just drop it down below. And if you have additional questions that you would like to ask us, feel free to reach out on GitHub as well. If you are going to be using the StreamFeed Flutter package, we will be happy to help you in whatever way we can. So with the introduction out of the way, we can actually go and delve into the code. So maybe make yourself a cup of coffee, as this is going to be a big one. As a beginning step, the first thing you naturally need to do is you need to create a new Flutter project. I've already done that, and I've called it Streamagram. So it may be simpler for you to follow the same naming convention, as that might make it simpler just when it comes to like importing all of the different classes that we will be creating later on. But feel free to call this whatever you want. And then next up, what we'll need to do is we'll need to add a few dependencies. So I'm going to just paste in the dependencies that we will need to use. As mentioned, this is all in the companion blog post as well, or you can just pause the video and take a look at what the dependencies are. What is important to note though is that I'm using a overridden dependency. Well, not overridden, but I'm setting the path for the stream feed Flutter core to my local development environment. On screen, I will add the latest version that you should be using that will be on the pub store. It is also important that for demonstration purposes and for you to easily follow this tutorial, to actually use the versions that are listed here, as there may be breaking changes or there may be alterations in some of these packages that could make this tutorial harder to follow. Once you finish this tutorial, or after you've cloned the final code that's on GitHub, you can easily change this as well if you want to. The next thing that you need to do is head on over to getstream.io, as we'll be using Stream as our backend API. So if you haven't yet, you can try Stream, and there's a 30-day trial, or you can actually access the Make account for free indefinitely. So if you are an individual or a small team, you can reach out to us for a free Maker account. I already have an account, so I'm just going to show you what the dashboard looks like for me. What you'll need to do is you'll need to create a new application. And for our purposes, we are going to call this Streamogram. So I've already created one. So I'm just going to call this Streamogram demo. It doesn't matter too much what you call this. It's just for you to identify it later in your dashboard. And you'll need to set the locations as well. I'm in the EU, so I'll set this. And you can choose between your environments. As we are still developing, we will set the environment to development. And we'll hit create app. And fantastic, you now see that we have our overview over here. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to define a feed group. And this will become a little bit more clear later on. It's also important to note that there are different types of feeds. So if we hit this button, there are flat, aggregated, and notification feeds. I definitely recommend that you read the documentations. So just to be clear, I click the read docs here. And this gives a lot more information on what feeds exactly is. And yeah, it's a complex beast. There's a lot that goes into managing an activity feed. To make it simple, a flat feed is essentially a feed that you can follow and you can post content to it. So in our case, we will be posting our photos to our flat feed. And then we will create another flat feed, the timeline, that will subscribe to specific user feeds. They are also aggregated and notification feeds, which we won't be delving into in this video, just because that would need to be reserved for a future video, as we probably won't have time to delve into that. So yeah, I do recommend reading this documentation. It's very helpful and will give you a different perspective on the different ways that you can use feeds. But as said, we are just going to be creating two simple feeds. And the first one will be called user feed. This will be of type flat. And the second one, add feed group top right here. This one will be timeline. And fantastic, also the flat feed. Okay, later on we will be using this in code and it will become a little bit more clear exactly how these come into play. One thing you can take note of now is that you have these app access keys. So as you can see, we have a key and a secret. And the key is free. You can share that publicly. That's you can compile it in your application as well. That is something that you will need in the front-end client to actually make a request to the correct application. So this is a key that is associated with this demo app. And then the secret is essentially your password. This is something that you will use to perform sensitive server operations. For example, creating user accounts or creating front-end tokens, front-end authentication tokens for specific users. We will be using this in a moment as we will be creating demo users ourselves. So naturally, the secret is not something that you want to use in your client's application. So this is not something that you want to be pushing to the App Store. You'll use the secrets on your own custom backend server, and that's where you will perform more sensitive server operations. For demo purposes, however, we are not going to be creating a backend, as we won't have time for that. But feel free to ask in the comments if you need assistance with that, or if that's a video that you would like to see. But what we are going to be doing is we're going to be hard coding certain front-end tokens that we can use for our users. So as an easy way to help you create these front-end tokens that we will need for our users, I created a Dart CLI package that will quickly get you up and running to actually generate these tokens for specific user IDs. One thing to note though is that the StreamFeed SDK actually supports a number of different SDKs. So if you take a look at the backend, these are all of the backend languages that we do support. And as we are Dart developers, we will be using the Dart client to create these tokens. So if you are following along, all you need to do is you need to clone this repository, and the link for that will be in the description. I've already done that, so I'm just going to navigate to the actual code. If you open that, you'll see that this is what you are greeted with, and it's a CLI package using Dart, and it's using the StreamFeed feed client to generate tokens. So here you can see we are generating a front-end token, and all you need to specify is a ID, or here I'm referring to it as a username, and we are saying that the token will expire in 30 days. So you can set the expiration date for this. So this is just so that we can hard code our tokens for demonstration purposes for this video. You should not be hard coding your tokens in a production environment. I'm just putting that disclaimer out there. So we are going to be creating a few users, 4 to be exact, and you can create your own. However, it may be simpler just to create the same users that I'm creating. So to run this script in the actual package file, you just say .run. And as you can see, now we need to give our API key. So if we navigate to our application, you can see here we have our API key. And now we can just paste that in. And now it needs the API secret. And I'm just going to copy this in. And I'll be deleting this application, so this will no longer be in use by the time you watch this video. So you have to create your own account. You won't be able to use the key and secret that I'm using here. And okay, great. Now it says that we need to give a username. So the first user is going to be myself. And we got our token now. And I'm just going to quickly speed through and do the same for the other 3 users. Okay, the 4 users are now created. Unfortunately, I tried to do a copy from my Notion dashboard, and it didn't copy them correctly. So these are not correct. Okay, but with that out of the way, we can go back to our original code and actually start the development of our Instagram clone. And the first thing that we can do is we can define some top level folders that we'll be using. And we'll be creating 2, an app and a components. The blog post goes into a bit more detail, discussing the entire layout and the reasoning behind it. But what is important to note though is that technically it doesn't matter how you structure your folders and files. For each application, it's probably going to be different. And the way that we are structuring the files for this particular Instagram clone is just because it was convenient for the code that we had. There's multiple ways you can do it, and this is by no means the suggested approach, and it may not work in every situation. But yeah, to give you a quick overview, the app directory is going to be everything that is app related, so general global states, navigation, controllers, and the components are essentially your widgets. So high level widgets, for example, screens and everything that is associated with a screen. One screen may contain its own state, it may contain its own widgets that it uses across different other widgets. So it's you'll see as we expand this a bit more. But yeah, that's the high level description for what we'll be doing. So in the app directory, we're going to be creating a new folder, and this will be called state. And in this state, we are going to create a new file called demo users. And I'm just going to paste in all of the code. And this is by no means an important how we actually do this. You could have done it in multiple different ways. But yeah, to quickly discuss this, we're creating an enum class. We are specifying the users of our application, or demo users, I should say. And then we are creating an extension on that enum class to get the ID, to get the name, and to get all of the data. So this will return an object with the first name, last name, full name, and then also to access the token. And as you can see, these tokens are, or these are added, they're marked as to-dos, as you will need to actually add your own custom tokens here for your stream API. And just to clarify again, all of this code is in the companion blog post. So if you want to follow along with this video and just copy paste, you can feel free to do that. So what we will do now is we need to copy over all of the tokens for these users. So I'm going to go through that manual process and just speed it up. Okay, and we're done. So now we have all of the tokens that we will need for our application. Something else that we will be doing in this tutorial is creating barrel files. And a barrel file is just an easy way for you to create one import instead of having like thousands, maybe not thousands in this app, but having plenty of imports in your application. So what do I mean by that? So in this directory, the state directory, we will create a state.dart file. And in that, we will be exporting all of the files in that directory that we want to expose higher up to other widgets. Well, not higher up, but to other widgets in the application. So here I'm just going to export demo users.dart. And then we are also going to create a app level barrel file, and we'll call this app.dart. And this one is now going to export the state.dart file. So now in our application, once we start creating widgets and stuff, we can just import this app.dart file, and that should import all of the state-related files that we may care about. Okay, and going on, in the app folder, we are now going to create a new file called theme.dart. And again, I'm just going to copy in all of the code. And this one, we won't be going into too much detail, as you'll see as we use the application that this will be essentially allow us to dynamically switch between dark theme and light theme. In certain areas of an application, we still need to do some additional checks to make sure that if it's light screen or dark screen. But for the most part, all this does is just defines a couple of text styles, some application colors that we will be using, and then we are creating a dark base and a light base, which is just using the standard theme data, dark and light, and then we're calling copy with on those bases for our custom themes, and then just specifying overrides for some of these arguments. And these are the things that we will use in this application. Feel free to take a look at this in your own time, and feel free to customize it as you want. And as always, now what we need to do is we can export the theme class in that file, in our app.dart barrel file. And next up, what we'll need to do is create a new folder, and we'll call this models, and this will be in the state folder. And believe it or not, we are only going to create one model, and that's going to be called users. Actually, no, it's not going to be plural, just user. So just one model that we will use for our application. And the reason for that is because the majority of the models that we will be using will be coming from the stream feed package. So I'm just going to copy all of this and then paste it in. And what this is just a data class with the following arguments. And we specify a from map method from JSON, copy with, and a to map. And yeah, then overriding the equal sign, toString, and overriding the hash code. This might seem like a lot, but it's essentially just a normal class with some convenience methods to copy to and from an object, and also to easily create new objects from this one using copy with. There are multiple ways that you could have done this. You could have used code generation, for example, a package like freezed, or you can use an extension method in your IDE to help you with this. So for example, I'm just going to create a demo class, call this test, and give it a field called name. And using a package called, let's see, it's a data generator, I think. Yeah, it's this one, Dart data class generator. What you can do with that is generate these data classes. So all you need to do is hit command dot in Visual Studio Code. It's obviously going to be different if you're using an other IDE because this package won't exist there. But then all you need to do is just say generate data class. And this will go through that entire process that we saw below to generate all of these files. And yeah, there you go. So that is the process to do that. And the reason that we are creating this streamogram user is because in the Stream Feeds SDK, we will be also supplying some extra data. We've seen some of this extra data in the demo user class. So the extra data that I'm talking about is this data get over here. First name, last name, full name. Later on, we will be setting profile pictures, and you may also set additional information that's relevant to your application. And the reason that we're creating this class and why we want this from map method is so that we can easily just pass in the data map that we get from the stream feed API, and then just quickly create this streamogram user, as we'll be using this quite frequently in our application. So I do hope that made sense. If it didn't, as we start using this class, I think it will make more sense. And like the good citizens that we are, we're going to create a new models file or barrel file, and we'll just export users.dart. Not plural, just user.dart. Okay, and then in our state, we will then be exporting models, not user. There we go. And this may seem unneeded, seeing as we only have one user file, but of one model file, but your application may grow in the future, and future you may appreciate that you went through the trouble of doing this. There's also an argument around whether barrel files are useful or not, but that's a topic for debate outside of the scope of this video. Okay, the next big topic for debate that we can discuss is state management, a favorite topic in the Flutter community. And yeah, you guessed it, our state will live in the state directory over here. And for the purposes of this video, we will not try to be opinionated. And for most practical scenarios in a Flutter application, a simple inherited widget is all you actually need to simply pass states from high up in the widget tree down to a lower widget somewhere else, wherever that may be. And the king of those packages is Provider. It simplifies using inherited widgets greatly, and also provides a lot of convenient functionality that we will be using in this later on in this tutorial. But yeah, feel free to use whatever you want. This tutorial is only using Provider because of its simplicity, and because a lot of people are familiar with the concept of an inherited widget. Okay, so with that little disclaimer out of the way, we're going to create a new file, and this will be in the state directory. We'll call this app state.dart, and I'll just paste it in, and we'll quickly discuss it. This class extends a change notifier, and if you're not familiar with what a change notifier is, it is a built-in Flutter class that makes it easy to observe changes in that class. So what do I mean by that? If we take a look at this streamogram user over here, this is going to be a mutable variable. And what do I mean by mutable? I mean that it is changeable. So for example, in this connect method that we have here, which we'll use later on, we actually set our stream user. And here you can see that after all of these checks are done, we'll get into this now, we set this variable. And once this change, we need to tell any of the UI that are subscribed to this class that, hey, there's been a change. And with change notifier, you do that by calling the notify listeners method. And as you can see, this says that it calls all the registered listeners. So this is something that Provider does as well. It makes it really easy for you in your application to listen to these changes. And you can also listen to precise changes, but we'll get into that a bit later. So for the most part, this is all we care about now, is this streamogram user. And we also care about the fact that we pass in the stream feed client. And you would have seen this before, the stream feed client, as this is what we used in our CLI package to create our server client. The only difference is that here the client is set to be a server, and later on, I can't find the code for this now. There we go. This one is set to be a runner of server, but what we want is we just want a normal client. We don't want to perform sensitive server operations. We'll create this in a moment and pass it into app state. Then this has a connect method, and this connect method calls the client or uses the client to call set user, and a set user will create or update the user, or create or get the user if it doesn't exist. And all we need to do is pass in a user object. Technically, all it is needed is the ID. And then we need a token. So this is why we needed the token. Without this authenticated token, you won't be able to perform any actions on behalf of a user. You won't be able to call set user, essentially. And then we pass in some extra data. And this extra data is retrieved from a demo user that we pass in. And the extra data is essentially this information that we have here. So once we create the accounts at this stage, we just want to set this information on our server as well. Okay, so that is all that we need. And as always, we will just need to export our app state. So let's put this at the top. And now let's get to the point where we're actually going to be exposing all of this and creating the building blocks, the important widgets for our whole application. And that will happen in a class that we are going to call streamogram. So in the app directory, we'll create a new file. We'll call it streamogram ... And I'm going to paste in the code as always. For now, it's going to give us an error message because we have not yet created a login screen. But that's fine. We'll get to that in a moment. What this does, it's a simple stateful widget. And part of that is that we get the app theme. And then in the stateful widget, we create two things. We create the stream feed client, and then we create our app state class. And the app state is this change notifier over here. And the app state requires the client, as we mentioned before. And then from that client, we also create something called a feed block. The feed block comes from the stream feed package. And this is the building blocks for our stream feed package. This is going to be the class that does all of the business logic. For example, following feeds or adding activities or seeing or having one feed follow another feed. This is essentially the master class that does everything that we'll be doing later on in this tutorial. And you don't need to worry about it. All you need to do is you need to expose it to your application. And you can expose this by using something called a feed provider. This does not use provider, or it's not associated with provider in any way. It just uses simple inherited widgets to expose our block to all of the widgets in our application. Certain components that we will be using that comes from the stream feed package will require the feed provider to be above it in the widget tree so that you can access, or so that they can access the feed block to do operations. It is important though that you only initialize this once, as if you initialize it multiple times, or if you accidentally use the wrong feed block in certain locations in your application, you may observe weird behavior. So if it probably simplify things to make sure that you only create this once. One to-do that we do have here is that we need to provide our API key. And you can get your API key from your dashboard. So I'm just going to steal this key. Well, not steal, but take it. And just put this in here. And then we can remove this to-do. Something that we need to talk about is this change notify provider. This comes from the provider package, and we are exposing a change notifier because the value that we are exposing is our app state. And if you remember, the app state is in fact a change notifier. And we do dot value because the app state is already created up here. Dot value means you're exposing a value that has already been created. And another thing we need to talk about is this builder. The builder just wraps everything with whatever you want. This is normally used to provide custom navigation. For now, what we're going to do is we're just going to expose our feed provider or our feed block in the builder like this. Okay, and then before we actually go into the login screen, we're going to create another helper file. We're going to call this utils.dart. And I'm just going to copy this and paste it in. And before we actually go into detail here, I did forget to export the barrel file for our streamogram file. So we'll be good little programmers and put that in. And yeah, here back to the utils file. All this does, it provides extra utilities on the build context as an extension. Well, technically, this will be for Snackbar, and this one is another one on the build context that is an extension for provider. We could have wrapped this in the same extension as well if we wanted to. So yeah, this method is called remove and show snackbar. All it does is remove the current snackbar, shows a new snackbar with the message. And this one, all this does, it just makes it easier for you to use provider to read the app state. So now in our application, all we need to do is say context.appstate, and then we can read the state of that change notifier. So it's a little bit less code later on to write. And then as always, just export that class. And then now we will be creating our first component. So in this, we will create a new file. And a little tip for you in Visual Studio Code, you can create directories by just doing / like this. So this will create a login directory, and then you can say login screen.dot. And then, yeah, as you can see, it created the folder, and it also created the file. And I'm just going to copy all of this. And what the login screen does, it essentially just runs over or goes through all of the demo users that we have. It also does some layout. So we have a single child scroll view with a column. And then for each of the users and demo app users, we are just creating a button that allows you to click and log in as that user. So for example, in the button press, we show snackbar connecting user. Then we call on the app state using that extension method context.appstate. We call connect. We pass in the user, this user that we get from demo app users. And then if it is successful, so if this method returns true, then we show that the user is connected, and we call a push replacement on the navigator and material page route, and we go to the home screen. Else, we show a message that says could not connect the user. So what we'll need to do next is create our barrel file for this and export. And then same as before, we're going to create a new file. This time it's going to be home screen.dot under the home directory. And I'm just going to create home.dot and export that barrel file. And in the home screen, we will paste all of this in. And for now, this is not going to be doing everything that it needs to do, as it's going to be a bit more complex later on in this tutorial. But for now, all it's doing, it's creating this list of widgets pages. So for now, it's just like placeholders, timeline page, search page, profile page. And then we have a scaffold with our title. And then in the body, this is important, we're creating a page view. And this will allow us to switch between the different pages. And before I actually go into more detail, let's actually run the application and you can see what it looks like. As that is the advantage of Flutter, is that we can run and see updates in real time. I just went back to login screen and updated this, or saved it, I should say. And then, okay, the last thing that we need to do to run our app is we need to finally go back to main.dart and delete all of this, and we'll just place this. So we are running initialized. This will be needed later. And then we're creating our app theme. And then we're running the Streamogram app that we created and passing in our theme. Important to note though, that I didn't mention, is that in the material app, we are specifying the light theme and the dark theme. Okay, so now we should finally be able to run our application. So let's do that and see what happens. Okay, so hopefully everything worked fine. And let's see, we're just gonna log in using this account, and okay, awesome. So now we have 3 different pages: profile, search, and timeline. And as promised, if we actually just jump back to the home screen, you can see that we have our page view, and the page view uses something called a page controller. And the page controller we create here, and we also pass in the page controller to our bottom navigation bar. So the bottom navigation bar is what you see over here. And in the page view, we set the physics to never scrollable scroll physics. If we were to remove this, then now you can scroll like this. But that is not how Instagram does it. So we will recreate it as faithfully as possible. And in the bottom navigation bar, we are creating just that. We're creating a bottom navigation bar. And this has bottom navigation bar items. And as you click them and they become highlighted, which you specify with this current index. So depending on the current index, it determines what's highlighted. We can also specify what the on-click handler does. So each time you tap one of these, it should do, on navigation item tapped. What this does, it takes the page controller and jumps to the particular index. And then to actually get this changing like this, depending on what the value is of the page controller, I've added a listener to the page controller that will get called each time the page changes. And then we just call setState. And the reason that it updates is because we're using, again, the page controller.page value as a current index. So, for example, if we were to, I don't want to do that, let's just undo. Let's remove this and just say 1. Now you can see that it's still changing the pages. It's just not doing the transitions and like changing between the different states. Okay, and then as a last piece, you may have noticed this nice little font for Streamogram. We're using the Google Fonts package, and we're using the Grand Hotel font with this size to create that nice looking font. And that is the first part of this tutorial technically done. I guess the setup part. From now on out, we are going to be creating and interacting more with our actual logic to create feeds to build Instagram further than what we currently have. So let us proceed. We're going to go back to our files. And we're going to create a new component, a new directory called app widgets. And the app widget is basically the global widgets that we will be using across multiple components. So for example, in the home screen, we may use it, in the login screen, wherever else, multiple places we may use these widgets. And we're going to create our first one called avatars. And I'll just paste that in. And all this is going to be our avatar widget. So a little circle with your picture. And if you don't have a profile picture set, it uses your initials. So there's also multiple constructors. So we have tiny, unnamed constructors, tiny, small, medium, big, and huge. And they're just different sizes that we will be using throughout the application. And they have default sizes that are set. These are just some constant values. And then we build this circular profile picture. We pass in the values. And then with this has story, you don't have to worry about that. That is maybe for future functionality. The container that we have here as well. And then the circle profile picture, this is the main bad boy. What this does, it determines whether to show the picture using the cache network image package, which will cache the image locally on the device. So basically the next time that you load the same image, it will load faster. And the container, which shows your initials if the profile photo is null. And as you can see here, we determine how to get the profile photo. The first thing that we try to get is a photo thumbnail. Otherwise, we get the profile photo resized. We'll get into this in a bit more detail once we upload photos. But yeah, nothing too special. You can take a look at this in your own time. You'll see this on screen in a moment as well. So we can save this, and then we'll create a new barrel file. And we need to name that correctly. And just export avatars. Next up, we are going to create a profile page. So new file, we'll create the profile directory and profile.dot. It will be called profile page. And the reason I'm calling this page and not screen is because these are the pages that you can navigate here. This is the home screen, but these are the pages in the home screen. Is that the best naming? I don't know. But it made sense to me. So okay, in the profile page, I'm sorry for that. In the profile page, what we have now is the main core logic that will allow us to use feeds and to show our first timeline, the user timeline. So to explain this, let's actually take a look at what this will look like. So as I mentioned, I created the page. We're going to go into all of the code in a moment. I'm going to save this file. I'm going to create a new barrel file and just export that profile page. And now back in our home screen, where we have the profile page over here, what we'll do is return the if I can spell it, return the profile page. And you may just want to make sure that it actually uses the barrel file. Okay, and now as you can see, we automatically got an update. So going to the profile page, this is what we see right now. Jumping back to the code, and let's go from the top. The first thing that we return in this status widget is a FlatFeedCore, which comes from the Flutter feeds package. And we specify our timeline to be user. And this is important. If we go back to our dashboard over here, you can see that we created our user feed. And sorry, I shouldn't say timeline. I should say our feed group is user. And this basically says that for this user, the feed that the user feed that he has, what activities are there to show that for us. And this provides a number of different arguments that you can supply. Limit, offset, session, filter. Filter will allow you to filter out certain content. Flags, which is something that we will explore later on and is extremely cool. ranking, which I myself haven't even used with. So yeah, there's a lot that you still need to explore. The limit and offset is essentially what you'll be using for pagination, which will be a bit more of an advanced feature, but the limit and the offset is essentially what you will need to use to create pagination or to load data from like a certain point. For example, if you only want to show the previous 50 posts or whatever. Okay, and then there's a couple of builders that we need to supply. Loading builder, error builder, empty, and feed. They do exactly what they indicate over here. The one that you're seeing at this moment is the empty builder. And you're seeing the empty builder because we haven't added any activities to our feed yet. And what this is right now is a custom scroll view. And a custom scroll view, if you're not familiar with it, is essentially a list view on steroids. List views actually use custom scroll views underneath. And custom scroll views use slivers. And slivers is the definition for what Flutter uses to describe anything that is scrollable or anything that should be in a scrollable list. So we can create, there's quite a complex topic, and I do recommend reading up on this if you're not familiar. But to simplify it, what we can do here is we can create lists in the custom scroll view and then also create components that maybe are outside of the list. So what do I mean by that? Here we're creating a sliver box adapter, which is this profile header over here. Then we're creating another one, which is the edit profile button. Then we're creating empty space. Then we're creating this no post messages, which is this one over here. And honestly, I don't know why we have this. Let's delete that. Yeah, we can remove that. And then in the actual feed builder, later on, you'll see that we're going to be creating something called a sliver grid. And a sliver grid is a grid list. But what this allows you to do is you can combine sliver lists, sliver grids, fixed size boxes. So it's essentially just a cool way to create custom looking scrolling. Well, not looking scrolling, but combining components. You can also do some cool transitions with a custom scroll view, but we're not going to be doing that in this video. So yeah, that's a long description out of the way. We are starting to get somewhere in our code. You may now realize that what we probably need to do next is we need to make a way for us to add posts. So the next thing that we're going to be doing, actually I'm lying, the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to edit our profile so that we can finally get a nice profile image for our users. For the edit profile thing, we will actually need to do a little bit of an update on our app state. So I'm going to go to the app state file, and I'm going to add a few extra pieces of code. So at the bottom of this connect, I'm just going to paste in this method. And as you can see, we require this is uploading profile picture variable. So at the top, I'm just going to paste that in underneath this one. And similar to what we discussed before, here we're setting a mutable variable is uploading a profile picture, which is initially false. What this means is a flag that we set to say, hey, we are busy uploading a profile picture. And in the method that we just added, upload profile picture, we give a file path, and then we say that once it's called, we set the variable to true. We call notify listeners so that all of the listeners in our application can respond to it and say, oh, okay, cool, we're uploading a profile picture. And then we're using the client, the stream feed client, calling images, calling upload, and then we're creating an attachment file and we're giving the file path. And this will upload that image with that given file path to the stream CDN. And CDN is Content Delivery Network. And then if the image is not null, or if it is null, I should say, then we log an error and we set is uploading profile pictures false, and we notify listeners that, it didn't happen. it didn't go through. If, however, this is successful, then what we do is we await the following two results. Getting a resized version of the image with a width and height of 500 and getting a resized image of 50 and 50. And the reason for this is because we don't necessarily want to display the original picture that we upload in our applications, because that's going to be very resource intensive from a graphical processing perspective. Because if you are showing 17 photos in a grid, for example, all of them on this page, then and all of these are like 1200 by 2000 pixels wide, well, aspect ratio wide, and this gets down, compressed down to a 50 by 50 size just to display a little thumbnail. That's going to be a lot of wasted resources. It's also going to be wasted megabytes or bytes to download those images. So that's why we're creating these resized versions, so that we can get the optimally sized image for the size of the widget that we want to display. And then, finally, we call copyWidth on streamogram user. And what this does is it gets the current streamogram user that we have, and we call copyWidth to create a new version of that, or to return a new immutable class. The things that we change now, however, is that we are updating the profile photo and the profile photo resized and the profile photo thumbnail. And we're getting these from the results, this future results over here. And we're doing this all together because now we can execute both of these features at the same time, instead of waiting for one to finish before executing the other one. And then, we're setting profile picture loading false. And finally, we are also updating our server with that information, because currently we're only setting this locally. This streamogram user is our custom user object. What we need to do now is we need to also update our clients, or the current user that is on the stream feed SDK, to propagate those changes from locally to the server. So we're calling updates on that. And from using the toMap method on the streamogram user, we are passing in the map data, which is of type string object. And we're doing this again so that next time you log in, that profile picture will be set. And then we call notify listeners. Okay. Phew, that was a mouthful. If we now go to our profile screen, we need a way to go from here. Once we click edit profile, currently it does nothing. You can see there's to do marked somewhere here. We need to go to a new screen that's called edit profile. Okay, so we're going to create that file. I'm going to say edit profile screen. And again, this is going to be a screen because it's an entirely new screen. It's not a page that we're showing in the page view. And let's bring in that code. Okay, so we'll discuss the code. Let's actually run it and see what it looks like. And we also need to remember to export this now in our barrel file. And what we'll need to do in the profile page now is override. We'll need to add a button or handle the button press. So when we press edit profile, what we need to do is we need to navigate to the edit profile screen. So I'm just gonna bring in that import, and great. So now hopefully edit profile, and okay, cool. And one thing you'll note is the transition is different. We are doing this transition from the bottom up, again, similar to how Instagram does it. And we're doing that using a custom route that we built. So when you call push on a navigator, you need to specify a route. And in the edit profile screen, we created a getter called route, which is a PageRouteBuilder. And this PageRouteBuilder has a transition builder, which gets an animation and a secondary animation. And then we are creating a custom slide transition. And we are transitioning from an offset of 0, 0 to an offset of 1. This is the beginning value. Offset with a width of 0, 0, 0. So this is actually not the width, it's the alignment. So alignments of 0, 0 and 1.0, and then it goes to 0, 0 for the offset. Sorry if that didn't make sense. What this essentially does, it creates the transition from the bottom of the screen, where it's visible in the width, but it's not visible in the height. And then finally 0, 0, which means it's visible everywhere. This is done by creating a tween, and we are driving an animation by taking this animation, calling drive on the tween, which creates a new animation for us, which we pass in over here. And this is an animation of type offset. And that's what's creating that nice slide transition. Now, what is important here is a couple of things. We are using the select method or using provider to only get updated when the streamogram user changes. Okay, so when the streamogram user changes for whatever reason, wherever we update it in the application, we will be, provider will re-execute this build method. Okay, and as you can remember in our app state, we are updating the streamogram user when we update the profile picture. And then here's just a couple of UI stuff. For the most part, it's just showing all of these different things, creating a list view, creating these text widgets. These aren't editable. So that's something you can easily add, is changing this as well. What this tutorial is also only going to show you is how you can update the profile photo. But in a similar way to how you update the profile photo, you can also update the name. Okay, so let's actually do that. We're going to take a look at how we can change the profile photo. If we tap this, it doesn't do, it does open the image picker widget, okay? And this is a package that we imported. As you can see, package image picker. And this just makes it simple for you to pick images on an iOS and Android device. So here you can see in our change profile picture button, we are creating an image picker, and we're creating an on-tap behavior or handler for this change picture that we call here. So in this gesture detector, once we tap this avatar or once we tap this change profile picture, we call this. And now it should hopefully work without issue. Let's see. I'm going to set my profile picture. And now it uploads it using, let's see, we pick the image, we get the file, and then if it's not null, we call context.appState, so our application state, and we call update profile picture, and we give the path of the file. And the update profile picture is what we've seen before, or what we created like a moment ago. And this does a number of things like creating the resized versions. And then, yeah, if any of this fails or if no profile picture is selected, we just say no picture selected. And done. Now we should have this also updated in our profile page. And the reason that it updated here is because we listened to it. So in our actual profile header, you can see that we watch the app state and we watch for the streamogram user. We can technically improve this whole process by using select again to only listen to the streamogram user changing. And I'll leave that as an exercise for you. If you want to optimize this app slightly a bit more, you can use select instead of watch to only get the streamogram user. Using watch listens to the whole app state. So every time you call notify listeners, this builder will be re-triggered, which technically, depending on how you handle your app states, may become out of hand or may not be exactly what you want. But yeah, that is how we get the responsive update everywhere. And if everything went well, we should be able to just do a hot restart. And now if we log in as Gordon Hayes again, we got our profile picture. So it's set on the server and it's also now locally. So great. I'm quickly going to go through the process of just restarting the application and logging in as all of the different stream developers and just setting their profile pictures, because we will be, it will look better. Okay, and that is done. The next thing that we're going to do is create another general application widget. And this one is called Tap Fade Icon. One thing to note though is we technically don't need to expose this edit profile screen to other parts of the app, but you may want to if you want to initiate this screen from different parts of the application. But yeah, back to what I was saying. App widgets, new file. We're gonna create a tap fade icon and just paste this in. And feel free to take a look at this in your own time. But it essentially, all it does is creates an icon. If you tap it, it fades the color slightly, and we're going to be using this in various areas of our application. As always, remember to export that in the barrel file. Okay, awesome. And now we're going to create a new screen, and it's going to be called a new post screen. And this is going to be an entirely new component as well. So let's create that new file. So new paste directory and then new post screen. And add all of that. And let's save this. And we'll talk about the code in a moment. I think it will be easier to actually also visualize it and see what's on screen before we talk about the code. And now we need a way to actually initiate this, or like to call this, again, to open the correct one. And as always, we'll just create our barrel file first and export that file. So going back to our profile page, at the bottom, here's a to-do. So this is the no post message. As you can see, we don't have any posts yet. So this is going to be the take us to the screen to add a new post. And then we just need to import that barrel file. And now if we tap this, fantastic, we are navigated to a new screen, which does the exact same thing. It opens the image picker that allows us to pick an image. And let's actually now explore the new post screen. The first thing that we do, we specify a couple of constants, which these are the constants that are set to say what the max image height and the max image width is. You probably noticed this as well in the edit profile screen. In the pick image, we specify a max width and a max height. What this does, it basically just instead of getting the full resolution image from the file that's in the gallery, it compresses it slightly. So it sets the image quality to 70 and the what the size should be. The reason for that is because we probably don't want to be uploading like a 17 megabyte photo, that's massively big. If it was stored on the phone, you want there to be some limits on like the files that you're uploading to your CDN. So yeah, going back to this, the pick file does exactly the same thing as before. The only difference is now we are using setState or stateful widget to basically manage all of the states. We are not doing anything app state related, as we don't actually need to do anything app state related, because the stream feed package manages that for us for the most part. All we need to do is we need to select an image and create an activity that you'll see now, and add that activity to the correct feed group. So, okay, let's actually go and take a look at the UI. In the UI, we are creating a scaffold, AppBar, exit, and a share button. If we tap the share button, it says please select an image first, and it also requires you to enter a caption. Otherwise, it says please enter a caption first. And this has a gesture detector that opens the image picker that we saw, this pick file over here, this inkwell. And this is just some decoration that we're doing to create this nice gradient effect. You can take a look at that in your own time. And then we have a text form field that requires us to enter a caption as well. Okay, so let's go through that. So let's select an image, and we'll select this one. And then we'll say a link, as that is what it is. And now if we hit the share button, let's just search for share. This will call post image. Okay. And the post image will make sure pick file is not null. It will make sure that we have something in the caption. And we will set the loading state to true. And then you'll see that if loading is true, we'll show a circular progress indicator over here. This just makes sure that you can't like accidentally upload multiple things at the same time. And yeah, jumping back, then we get the client from the app state. And then using the client, we're doing a couple of things. We are uploading an attachment file, again, as we saw before. We are resizing it, again, like that's what we did earlier. And then the magic now is that we are using the feed provider to get the feed block. And as I mentioned way back when, the feed block is our big daddy. He's doing everything. We're calling on add activity. This is the thing that will create an activity or a post on a feed. We specify the feed group to be user, as you're posting this to your user timeline or your user feed. Okay, this is just for you to see. And the verb that we're using is post. Here I do recommend reading the stream documentation. I also suggest reading the blog post that I wrote as a companion for this video, as that goes into a bit more detail of what all of this does. But essentially it reads like this. A user posts an image with this data to that feed, okay? And depending on what the verb is, you can do some complex things on stream feeds. Depending on what the object is, you can refer to specific object IDs to do things to analyze or like group things together. It can get quite complex, the stuff that you can do with stream feeds. That complexity is outside of the scope of this tutorial, unfortunately. But again, if that's something you'd like to see, let us know in the comments. Okay, so after adding the activity, the important thing here is this data as well, because we specify the description for the image URL, resize the image URL, the width and the height, and the aspect ratio. And this decoded image we didn't talk about. What this does, it decodes the image, so it essentially reads the image in, and we're doing that extra piece of work simply because we want to get the original width and the original height. More importantly, we actually want to get the aspect ratio of this this image, because having the aspect ratio will later on allow us to also simplify the way that we present these images on screen. For example, if we have a list view and the image is loading in, while that image is loading in, it's very nice to know what the aspect ratio is, because then you can already create the size of that image on screen and then fade it in without like the list view jumping down like this, you know? So that's essentially what the reason why we're doing this. And later on in the UI, this will become a bit more clear. Okay, but that's it. Now if we add an activity, moment of truth, we're just gonna, I screwed up, I unselected the image. Hopefully this doesn't break anything. Let's just share it and see what happens. And okay, great. We got a to-do. That to-do is because we need to do that. So in our profile page, let's search for that to-do. This is in the feedBuilder. So it's no longer empty. That's fantastic. That means we actually have an activity in our feed. So we need to return something over here. I'm going to delete all of this and just paste in the code. And then we also need to import the cache network image package. And beautiful. Now we got our exact same thing that we saw before. As you can see, it's now updated with one post. And this is something we still need to explore. And then we have this image. Fantastic. Let's quickly explore this header, as that's something that we didn't talk about much. If we scroll to the top and go to profile header, you can see that the profile header also watches the feed state and watches the streamogram user. That we did talk about. What we didn't talk about is the fact that in these little texts here for followers and posts and stuff, we are getting the number of posts. This is passed in as a widget. And then we are getting the followers count. So we're using the feed provider and the feed block to get the current user and to get their followers count. If it's empty or null, we say that it's 0. And then in the same way, we get the following count. Okay, and currently we're not following anyone and no one is following us. And if we go back a bit, in the loading state or empty builder, we say that number of posts is 0 because it can't be more. And in the event that the builder is true, like feedBuilder, then what we do is in the profile header, we say that the number of activities is equal to the activities.length. And the activities.length is now only equal to 1. Okay, so we finally did it. We've added stuff to our activity feed. And yeah, the next thing that we're going to do is make a nice little picture viewer so that we can click this image and expand it and view it a bit. Okay, and to create that picture viewer, we will need to do a couple of navigation things to make it really shine. So in our app file folder, I'm going to create a new one called navigation. And inside that, we are going to create a class called RectTween. And I'm just going to add in the following. So this is a class that extends RectTween and overrides the lerp method. And lerp is essentially something that happens over time. So this double T is the value at a time. And we need to return a rect. So we're creating a rect from left, top, right, bottom. Okay. Feel free to read up more on this on your own. But basically what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to override the default hero transition that we'll see in a moment to make it a little bit more plain, in my opinion. Well, it is definitely more plain, but better, in my opinion. I'm not a fan of the default hero transition. But yeah, this shows you how you can do it, and you can customize it however you want. The next thing that we'll need is also a custom route, page route. So there's multiple ways you can do this. This one is quite nice if you actually just want to do a little pop-up on the screen. Yeah, again, for the most part, you can look at this yourself. But we're extending page route, and we're setting, you can do multiple things. You can set the barrier color. So this is going to be like a page route transition that shows up. And you can override or set the transitions that you want. So we just want a normal fade transition. It just fades it in from nothing to something. And yeah, the rest of this you can actually look at yourself. But the next step is now to, as always, create a barrel file. Also, what we're doing here will be a little bit more clear, what we're doing once we actually use these files. So this is not called barrel, it's called navigation. And export those. And as this is in our app directory, we can also add this export over here. Okay. And then at the bottom of our profile page, because this will be semi-happening in our profile page, we are going to add the following. This class called Picture Viewer. So this is a private class. It's just going to be used inside of our profile page. And what this does, it gets in an activity or an enriched activity. And later on, we'll talk a bit more about what enrichment is and how this is really important and really neat for stream feed. But yeah, using that activity, we're getting the resized image URL, the image URL, the aspect ratio. And the reason we're taking in both of these images is because at the moment in this list view grid, if we scroll up, that's something I didn't talk about, sorry. Let's take a look at the grid, sliver grid, sorry. We talked about the custom scroll view, but now we're returning a sliver grid and we're specifying that this is the parameters for that. And we're creating a sliver child builder delegate. Again, this can be quite complex if you've never done this. Definitely read the Flutter documentation, it's excellent. But the main thing that we're doing is we're returning these images in grid views. And as you can see, we're using the resized image URL. So that means that we're using the smallest image possible that we have to show, instead of showing like the full resolution version, because that will be a waste of resources. However, when we now wanted to expand this to the full screen and be able to zoom in and stuff, we want to show the full-sized image URL. And I'm going to be showing you a really clever way that you can quickly fade in between the one you have cached, the low-res version, to the one that's being downloaded, the high-res version. And for that, we will need the aspect ratio. So that's one of the reasons that we set that as well in our data. So before we go into more detail, let's create the actual code to allow us to initiate this transition to that thing. So in the sliver grid, let's just find that. Okay, here's the sliver grid. Here's the cache network image. We're going to wrap this in a Euro widget. And we'll need to give it a tag. And the tag that I'm going to give it is the following. So what this does, Flutter automatically can do really cool transitions for us if you specify that a widget from one page to a new page, if you wrap it in a Euro tag, a Euro widget with the same tag. And as you can see, if we take a look at the widget, the PageViewer widget, we do exactly that. We wrap our widgets again in a Euro tag so that Flutter can do that transition for us. You'll see what that looks like in a moment. So if we go back, we also now need to wrap this in a gesture detector. So I'm going to wrap this in a gesture detector. And then in the onTap method, I'm just going to paste in some code. What this does, it uses the navigator to push our Euro dialog route. So this is the one that we made in our navigation folder over here. And it uses that route, and we specify a builder, and we return the picture viewer, and we give the activity that we have. So the current activity that's in the grid. So now if we click this, you should see it fade in from the low-res version to the high-res version. So ready? And it slowly faded that in as soon as the high-res version was retrieved. And what's awesome about that, it could even do it while the transition is in progress. And yeah, we can also zoom in. And we'll talk about how we did that in the code in a moment. But yeah, now if we press the back button, you can see it does a cool transition for us. So let's go to the code. In the picture viewer, we have this interactive viewer, and the interactive viewer is exactly that. That is what allows us to create the slidable or draggable and pan around. And the reason it's over here is because we want it to fill the entire screen if we zoom in. If you were to put this lower, then it won't. You can play around with this with yourself. Move this to different locations and see what it does. But yeah, again, we have our Euro tag. And this is where we're creating that custom rectangular tween. If we were to remove this and press it, you can see it does, like when you open it, it does this small to big. It doesn't look as good, in my opinion. Like it's a bit too much. It does like this wave curve thing. This just simplifies it and makes it a little more subtle. a little bit more like, I guess, what iOS maybe does. Yeah, you can play around with that. But this is where the magic happens. We're creating an aspect ratio widget, and we're setting the aspect ratio to the value that we expect it to be. For whatever reason, if nothing is specified, we just set it to 1. Like if this happens to be null. But this will allow us to make sure that both of the low-res image and the high-res image use up the same amount of space. Now, we're using a cache network image. The first, this cache network image takes in the full-size image URL. Okay, so the moment you open this, it's going to start loading that. Unless it's cached, then it's immediately going to show it. At this point, it's already cached, so it's automatically showing the full-res version. But the magic now is this placeholder. So in the placeholder, what we're doing is if the resized URL is not null, for whatever reason, just a safety check, we display the current cache network image that we have. And by current, I mean not technically the current one, but at least the one that's using an image URL that is already cached. What's showing here is cached. So the moment we open this, it's using the placeholder and it's showing the cached version. However, once the image builder is fired, once this image is retrieved, then we now return the full resolution one. And yeah, all of this is just code I had to write to make sure that it actually did the sizing correctly and stuff. You can play around with this. But yeah, a cool little trick for you if you wanted to do something similar in your application. Now, you may have noticed a small problem for our application. How do you add more posts? Currently, there's no like the button to add post tag on. So for that, we'll need to create we need to add that to our AppBar. Sorry for the mumbling. We're gonna go back to our home screen, and for this, we are going to set some actions on our scaffold. So this scaffold that we see over here. So I'm just gonna add that in, and sorry, that's the wrong place. It should be in the AppBar, not the scaffold. And what this requires us is to bring in the app widgets file, because that is the tap fade icon that we made earlier. And then we also need to import the new post screen. So I'm going to import that barrel file as well. And now there's 3 icons. This icon doesn't do anything. It's just there for visual purposes. The heart doesn't do anything at this stage, just there for visual purposes. But the post, the button over here, if we tap this, we can go to the post screen. And now if we post an image, and just wait for that to finish. Cool, our feed is updated, post created, and we can load that in as well. And beautiful. This is starting to look really good, if I say so myself. Okay, the next big step in our journey to create a streamogram, I'm going to call it streamogram, is to create the search page. So at the moment, this is nothing, it's empty. And this is where you can actually get quite advanced. You can use some of the cool stream feed capabilities to do some really advanced stuff to, incorporate searching. For now, all we're going to do is we're going to be able to show the other users in the app, other demo users, and you can follow and unfollow them. So let's create that page. In the components, we'll create a new file. And this is going to be a search directory, and we'll call it search page. ... And I'll add the following. And then, like the good developers we are, we'll create the barrel file. And this is annoying me. We're just going to delete our tests. Like the bad developers we are, we're not going to do test. So go back to the search that we had. And we'll get to this in a moment. Let's actually show what it's going to look like on screen. We'll go to the home screen, and now we can, back in our home pages, we're going to say search page, and boop. I don't know what I wanted to say there, but yeah, we got it. So we now can see all of the users and we can follow and unfollow them. So let's take a look at the actual code. What we're doing is we're getting the users, all of the demo users, and then we're removing us. So the current authenticated user, context.appstate.user.id, we don't want to see us. Currently logged in as Sahil. Sahil doesn't want to see himself in this list, essentially. And then, item builder, we're creating a list view with the length of the users, and then creating this user profile. And this user profile does a couple of things. It's a stateful widget, and the moment the stateful widget is created, we call getUser to populate this user data feature, which is a feature of Streamogram user. And what this does, it uses the app state, client, and then user. And we're doing that so that we can get the user with this particular user ID. And then we're calling on that user client, we're calling get. And what get does is it gets the user data. So for the user ID of Sasha, Sasha Arbunel, sorry, Sasha, if I'm saying your surname wrong, we call get, and we do another feature to say whether we are following that user or not. Okay, so is following user is using the feed provider of context block, so feed block, and we're checking to see if we are following that feed. So it checks to see if the current user that is logged in is following this user with this user ID. Okay, that was a lot. And the user ID is what we get over here. Okay, so important to note though is that this automatically populates the followee group and the follower feed group. And this is automatically set to user and timeline, as user and timeline is quite a standard terminology that we can use. And that's normally what you would do in a normal feed application. If you wanted to change this because you used different feed naming, then you'd need to change it over here. So once this data is complete, or we use this in a feature builder, and once that is complete, once the connection or the snapshot has data, then we show the profile tile, and this just some additional information that we pass in. And in the profile tile, what is important here is this method called follow or unfollow user. So this again gets the block, feed block, and we call unfollow feed if we are following them, or we call follow feed if we aren't following them. And all this needs is, it needs, again, the timeline and user feed groups, and you need to specify the ID of the user you want to follow. So that is quite straightforward. And then once this is done, this is a little extra step that we're doing. We are calling query enriched activities to actually refresh all of the data that we are getting for our timeline. So once we create this timeline, we actually want to refresh that timeline to reload all of the data once you follow someone new. This is something that you don't need to do. There's multiple ways you can do it probably. But yeah, we are going to do this. I do, however, note that there is an issue, as currently we are not specifying something that we should be specifying, and that is the flags. So just give me a moment, I'm going to add that. Okay, and the flags that I'm adding is the with own reactions and the with recent reactions and with reaction counts. And this we'll get into in a moment. Just know that this is really cool, but we'll talk about it in a bit. Okay, so now the moment of truth. Let's say that Sahil wants to follow Sasha. Okay, it's working, it's following, but obviously we don't have anything in our timeline yet, and we can't actually validate if that is working or not. So we'll need to do a couple of extra things before we can actually get the gratification of seeing our results working. So it is then, I guess, finally time for us to create the timeline feed. But unfortunately, before we can do that, there's a couple of extra widgets that we need before we can get to the timeline, because the timeline feed is going to be quite complex and there's a couple of helper methods, so helper widgets that we need. The first one is a favorite icon. So yeah, a favorite icon is exactly that. It is a way for you to favorite something in your application. Or another way to say that is a like icon. So the heart icon that you see in apps. Very simple. It just takes in an on tap. So what happens when the thing is tapped? And then it's a stateful widget that sets whether it's liked or not liked. And if it's liked, it sets the color to this. And if it's not liked, it doesn't use a color. Straightforward. Or it uses the default theme color. One thing that we can explore now is probably changing the theme. If you wanted to, you can quickly change the theme to be light theme. All you do is you say theme mode dot light. And honestly, this is something that I should have probably done is not have this. You can set this to be the platform default, so you can just remove this and then it will use whatever is the platform default. But I have to say I quite like the dark theme, so we will stick to the dark theme for now. Okay, so favorite icon is created. We're back in this page, and in the app widgets file, as always, we're just going to export that. And the next thing that we'll create is something called a comment box. And this is quite a big file. Just comment box. There we go. This is going to be the way that we can show comments on screen. And I'll touch on this in a little bit. I'll get back to that. For now, you can just get the code from the blog post and copy it in. It will be, again, easier to actually see what is happening on screen before we get to that. And then now, finally, we can start creating some of the timeline components. I am just going to minimize this. So let's create a new folder called timeline. And then in the timeline, we're going to create another folder called widgets. And in this, we're going to create a file called postcard.dart. And then I'll just copy in the information. And this is unfortunately an even bigger one. And again, we're going to get back to this because this is quite complex and it will be easier to visualize. So bear with me while I quickly add all of these files. We're going to create a widgets.dart file. And we'll just export the postcard. And then in the timeline, we'll create a new file called timeline page.dart. And we'll also create the barrel file. And we'll export the timeline page. And we'll also export the widgets. Technically, we don't need to export the widgets. Okay, and then finally, we are going to add the timeline page data or code. And this is giving us an error because we need to bring in the comment box. So that is because we've not added the comment box to the app widgets. So if we go back to app widgets, and here we just need to export the comment box. And I can see instead of like adding another import, we already have our app widgets import in that timeline, and it's importing everything we need one shot instead of creating multiple imports. So it tidies things up a bit and makes it a bit easier. Okay, and now we're going to get to this, I promise, in a moment. We need to show this. So go to home screen. And in the home screen, now we will show the timeline page. And okay, it says no posts, go and post something. Okay, this makes sense. because at the moment we're only following Sasha, and Sasha has not posted anything. So let's just do a hard restart. And we know that Sahil has posted something. So let's log in as Sasha. And we'll go to the feed, the follow feed, and we'll follow Sahil. And now we should see that Sahil's activity showed up. So what this is doing is we are now following the user feed on our timeline, Sahil's user feed. And everything that Sahil posts will go to our timeline. And beautiful. And there's multiple things that we already get out of the box now. We can add a comment. And as you can see, we have some nice animations for that comment as well. We can interact with the keyboard. Like if you press it, that's my mistake. I did not want to do that. Press the wrong shortcut. Okay. Yeah, so what I was saying, did I really set a breakpoint now? Okay, I'm just gonna restart. That's a problem with me hitting a shortcut that I shouldn't have done. Okay, as you can see, we get nice animations and everything. So let's say nice. And as you can see, Sasha's comment has been added. If we go to the comment screen, I forgot, we haven't created the comment screen. We need to do that. We're gonna do that in a moment. But yeah, okay, we have a small error here. I've not observed this at all using this. So I think it's something else that's wrong. I think it may be Flutter. I'm just going to do a close and then just start the application again. Okay, third time's the charm. We'll log in as Sasha. And as you can see, we can add multiple comments. So I'm just going to say multiple. I'm just going to type it out. And there you can see. Now, let's actually discuss what is happening and let's take a look at the code. We'll start off at the timeline page. So what you see over here. And we'll get to the methods in a moment. But everything is wrapped in a geisha detector. And the reason for that is because if the comment box is open, we want to be able to tap on the screen and then set the focus scope to be unfocused. And the focus scope is used to focus on the text editor once it's selected. We'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. But very importantly, we are using a stack to show our FlatFeedCore. And the FlatFeedCore is the timeline, which we've seen before in the profile page. And then in the stack as well, we're creating this comment box. Okay, this comment box is what we saw when we tried and add a comment. So when you tap on the screen here, oh my gosh, I don't know why this error is happening. I guess the widget has been exposed. Okay, for the time being, we are gonna ignore this and I'll try and debug it a bit later. The updated code and the blog post should have this without this error message. But I do want to just continue and discuss the actual code. So yeah, in the timeline, if we go back to the FlatFeedCore, we specifying timeline, we got error builder, loading builder, empty builder as normal. And then this is what we talked about before, but now we'll go into detail. And we have our feed builder as normal. The feed builder is currently executed because we do have activities on our feed. If no activities are, then we get this message over here. And then we wrap everything in a refresh indicator. And this refresh indicator allows us to just do a drag down to refresh. And then we call query enriched activities, and we specify the feed group as timeline, and we specify the flags that we want to set. So now this is the important bit. What are these flags? Okay. If we read them, it kind of makes sense. It basically says that we want flags with own reactions, with recent reactions, with reaction counts. Okay. So as you can see, it says that it's liked by Sasha, and Sasha has added these two comments. if we were to do a hot restart, let's log in as Gordon. Let's follow Sahil. And let's go to the timeline. And now I can like it. And I can say liked by Sasha and by Gordon. And I'm also going to add a comment. Hello. And now you can see it says view all 3 comments. And we haven't implemented that functionality yet. But it's showing only the most recent comments. If we were to add more, like a lot of comments, it's only ever going to show the most recent ones. So that's what this recent reactions does. With own reactions means that it's going to retrieve your reactions. So it might prioritize things that you've posted, so comments that you've added. And then reaction counts, it says how many people have liked this. So as an example, in this refresh indicator where we query the enrichment activities, I'm just going to uncomment that. And then I'm going to do a pull down. And now you can see that where's our comments? You can see it's liked by Sasha and Gordon, but where's the information about the comments that were added? And that information was with these flags that we specified over here. And this is something that you can explore more on your own. There's other enrichment flags that you can add, and they all do something different. And I suggest reading the documentation to explore this in more detail. Essentially, we want this because we need the reactions, own reactions, recent reactions, and the number of reactions that were made. Okay, so in our list view builder, this bad boy over here, we are returning the postcard that we made. And this is a massive widget that we'll get to in a bit. This postcard needs the enrichment activity. Okay, so this is the activity that we get. And we need to specify what happens when you click on this comment box over here. That we're getting an error for. And it's really frustrating, but I don't know why. I guess it's easy to figure out. So I just don't want to do it now. Again, the code, updated code won't have this issue on the blog post, and on GitHub. But essentially, what this on add comment does, it's the callback that will tell us when this area over here is clicked to add a comment to the activity feed. So, and on that, we go to the open comment box. And this open comment box gets the activity, so the activity that was clicked with this comment box over here, and it gets a message. And the reason it gets a message is because if you click the heart or like this hands up icon, it will actually populate that automatically and add it to the text editing controller, as we'll see here. The thing that I wanted to show you is that if you press the heart icon, it automatically populates with the heart icon, and we can now send that message. And that is done because we are also passing in the message back from this postcard, which we will explore in a bit. But the thing that we're doing is we have this comment text controller, text editing controller. We set the text, and we also then set the selection point to be at the end of the thing. If you don't do this step, then when you do this, then the selection icon over here would be on the left side. Then we set the active activity because we'll be using this later on. And then we set the show comment box, which is a value notifier, to true. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And then we comment focus node, we request focus. Okay, so the comment focus node is also a focus node that we created that will pass into our comment box. So all of this is now used at the bottom here for this comment box. We specify the commenter, which is the person that's making the comment, the current logged in user. We're specifying the text editing controller, which we saw above. We're specifying the focus node, which we saw above. And we're specifying show comment box. Oh, this is the value notifier to dictate whether we show it or we don't show it. And I'll get to that in a bit. And then finally, we have this callback that calls add comment. And this add comment is that's the thing that adds a reaction to our feed block. A reaction is different to an activity, as a reaction adds something on top of an activity. it reacts to an activity. So here, the kind of reaction is a comment. And this can be anything that you want it to be, but you need to specify that when you display things. So the kind is a comment, as that is what it is for us at least. Your application may be different. We specify the activity that we're adding it to. That's what this active activity is that we set. We specify the feed group that it's on, and then we also specify the data that we want to send. This can be anything that you want. We want to specify a message for the comment. And then once the comment is added, we call clear for the text editing controller so that this gets cleared. And we say the focus scope false, and we say that we want to show the comment box not a false. Okay. And a value notifier, this one that show comment box, this is similar to a notifier, a change notifier, but it contains a single value. And this single value is just a bool. So it's basically, do we want to show the comment box or not? And in this comment box, what we're doing with that show comment box is we're adding a listener in a init state to show or hide the comment box. And what this is doing is it's triggering our animation controller. So if you're not familiar, take your time, take a look at this class and see what we're doing. But the reason that this is a bit more complex than just like using an implicit animation that Flutter provides, we could have easily used a widget called, for example, if we scroll up here, we could have replaced all of this with something called an animated widget, I think. Yeah, animated widget, or no, animated opacity, sorry. And then you can easily just set the opacity to be 0 or 1, specify the duration and specify the child. And then depending on the value of the show comment box, you set it to 1 or 0. That's a quick way you could have done it. But the problem is that would have still like actually rendered it on screen. Flutter would still have gone through the process of been like painting all of those, not painting, but like building all of those widgets. It's technically at a scale level, painting it and then hiding it in the opacity. Flutter is not that smart enough to know that you set it to 0, so it shouldn't go through those processes by itself. So that's what we're doing in this comment box, and why we're doing an explicit animation, why we're setting our own animation controller, why we're creating our own animation values, is because we also want to specify whether the whole widget is visible or not. So this visibility. And we're doing that by adding a status listener to our animation controller. And the animation controller, when the status changes and when it's dismissed, we set the visibility to false. Otherwise, we set the visibility to true. So as an example, let's just set this to true and add this. And now if we click away, why didn't it work? We need to do a hard restart. Okay, so now if we add a comment and click away, it goes away. The opacity goes away. But if you scroll down and you take it away and you click here, I'm not sure if you can hear my mouse, but I'm clicking and it's not clicking it. And that is because the widget is still there. It's just not, you can't see it. The opacity is 0. So what you can do is you can either say that you want it to not be clickable, or better yet, you can just tell Flutter not to display it at all. It's not there. You save on performance, you save on rendering. It doesn't need to go through all of the process of hiding it as well with opacity. And opacity is an expensive widget from a performance perspective. So yeah, we want this to be false. And what we're doing with this visibility is a visibility widget. So if this one is false, it won't show. If it's true, it will show. And that's the reason that we are doing a little bit more work for a lot better result. Yeah, so I hope that made sense. So now if we click this, we need to do a hot restart. We'll go to Gordon. And now, even though like this thing should be here, we can still click it. And because it's not there and it can show it. Oh, okay, I took too long explaining that, but it's okay. Going back to our builder, we're building our postcard, and this postcard is the whole thing that you see here. So this is a really big widget, and some of this you'll have to take a look at on your own time. But yeah, we're creating a profile slab, this one here. We're creating a picture carousel, this one here, which shows the picture. And all of this we've technically done before, so you can take a look at the code yourself. We're getting a description, which is normally shown if there's like a description for the image. So Sahil Kumar said that this is stylish. That's the description. The picture carousel also shows who's liked it and like adds this functionality. Interactive comments lab is this one over here. And interactive meaning that you can click this and like it adds the hearts and stuff like that. And you can also do more things like do stuff like that. Okay, so picture carousel, this is this one over here. This is handling all of the like and unlikes. And here, instead of updating the feed block, because we are doing it a bit differently. We're managing the like state locally or in our local state, because we don't want the entire feedBuilder to re-trigger and rebuild all of those widgets just when you are liking a post. Adding a comment makes sense because you want to display what that comment is, but a like is like yes or no. So in the add like reaction, what we're doing is we are basically doing it ourselves. We're using the client, so the stream feed client, reactions, and we're adding one which is of type like. We are specifying the activity that we're adding it to, and we're specifying the user ID who's adding it. We're getting that latest reaction and we're adding it to the like reactions for this post. And then these like reactions, we're getting the like reactions using basically getting the initial like reactions from the activity. So getting all of that. If it's empty, we say it's null. And yeah, that's essentially just us managing it ourselves instead of relying on the stream feed block doing it for us, because it will be more performant for us to manage it, you know, if that makes sense. Because if we didn't do it the other way, it would require everything to rebuild. But yeah, take a look at this in your own time. Remove like reaction is a similar way. Now we're just removing it. We're removing the reaction with that particular ID from the list. And then, yeah, just doing some, but not complex, but like a little UI stuff to actually be able to show all of this information. There's also a to-do because we still need to make a button handler for when we press the comments over here. Okay, and then the description, it gets the activity, gets the description from the extra data that's passed in and displays it. And it also displays the current, or the user that posted it, his or hers username. Then we have the interactive comments lab, which gets the on-add comment, which we saw earlier, which is that callback. And that callback basically just gets triggered once the gesture detector is tapped. So once any of this is tapped. And if one of these icons are tapped, then we also set the message for the heart or the message for the hands. And the rest is just layout. And then finally the profile picture. This is just showing us this little profile picture here. Profile slab. I don't know what that is. Let's see. I think it's the slab over here. No. The profile slab is this user profile over here. That just, yeah, you can explore that on your own. So yeah, sorry for going over this so fast. This video is turning out to be a lot longer than I anticipated already. And there's one another thing we need to add, and that's the comment screen, because that's really cool, and you'll see why. Okay, so what we're going to do now is in our components, we'll create a new folder called comments. And this one will actually require us to manage additional states because it's a little bit more complex. Not really. You could have done this multiple ways, but we'll do it this way. And we'll say that this is called the comment state. .dart. And okay, fantastic. The comment state is again a change notifier, and it's basically dependent on the type of comment. And we'll get into this in a bit more detail. It'll be easier to explain once we see the code. So let's see. We'll create a barrel file, new file, comments.dart, and export state.dart, and we need to create that. And we'll also create a new file here, call it comments screen.dart, and then another massive file. We're just going to drop that in, and this will require us to also add the correct state file. So this is actually my mistake. This should be state.state, and we can actually rename this to just be comment state. We don't want it to be plural. Okay, and then in the comment screen now, let's take a look at what's happening here. Actually, let's first open it. So we'll go to the timeline screen or timeline page, and we have this to do somewhere. I could have sworn we had it to. Oh, the to do is in the postcard. So this to do, we actually have multiple to dos. And for this one, we'll add our comment screen. I'm just going to do that. I'm going to ignore that for now. And what this is going to do is when you tap the button, it will navigate to the comment screen, and it will give all of this information over here. And in the exact same way, we're just going to add it to this bottom to do as well. So the information that we are adding is the enrich activity and the activity owner data. So that's essentially the current, the actor, so the person who posted the activity. Oh, okay. So let's now see what happens if we tap the comment button over there. Awesome, it takes us to the comment screen. And this is the really cool thing that I want to show you. You can add a reaction to a reaction. So we're liking a comment. And in the same way, you can also reply to someone's comments. So let's just say awesome. As you can see, replying to Gordon Hayes. So I'm replying to myself over here. And I can also like my own thing. Yeah. So in the comment screen, we're going to skim over this because most of this is technically stuff that we've seen before at this stage. It's similar to what we've done in other areas of the application, just done slightly differently. But yeah, what we care about the most, I guess, is the fact that now we're using, instead of using the normal core that we saw before, we're using the ReactionListCore. And the ReactionListCore allows you to retrieve reactions, as you can guess, so instead of getting activities. So to clarify that more, in the timeline page, we're using FlatFeedCore because it's a flat feed, but now we're using a ReactionListCore because it's a reactions. We want the kind to be comments because we're adding comments. If you remember, previously we specified that. And we also want to say what the lookup value is. And in this case, the lookup value is going to be what activity it is, the ID of the activity. So awesome. And then we have this list view builder, and we're just building all of the information that we can see here. And you can take a look at this in your own time. Again, we are specifying what's enrichment flags to show, so like information. And then we have a comment box. Again, this is this bad boy over here. And we also have a comment tile, which is these tiles over here. And the main thing that is now different is the fact that we need to determine when to add a normal comment, like this one, and when does a comment need to be a reply. So like if we reply to this one, when does it need to be a reply? And that is what that custom solution is that we're doing in this comment state file. It has two types of comments, an activity comment and a reaction comment. And this class called comment focus that basically says whether this comment is in focus or not. All of the information for this is here. And then a change notifier to dictate, you want to see if this is used, yeah. Then a change notifier to say like what the comment state is for that user, like what is the activity ID, what is the owner data, and we can set the comment focus to be you're focusing on a certain comment, and we can reset the comment focus. So as an example, if we were to click reply for this, we call set comment focus. We set the focus data locally that we have here, and we call notify listeners. And when notify listeners is called in the comment screen, so let's say comment state, yeah, context.read. Here you can see we call set comment focus with this gesture detector. And later on, we should also read that. Yeah, okay, this is handle submit. We don't care about that. Here we're selecting only the comment focus state from that. So here we have that. And this is inside the comment box. And as you can see, if with this comment focus that we have here, we say if the comment focus type is reaction comment, then we show the reply to box. If it's not, then we don't do that. And then in the same way, when we actually send the thing, so in handle submit, we get the comment state in the exact same way, comment focus, I should say. And if it is an activity comment, we add a reaction, a normal reaction on the activity. But if it is a reaction comment, then we add an on-child reaction. As that makes sense, right? So you add a child reaction to a reaction. And we should do this 2 times, I think. We should do it in the like as well. But yeah, I'll let you explore that in more detail. Again, sorry for skimming over this, but yeah, the code is quite complex. Not complex, but it's a lot. And it might make sense for you to just explore it yourself. But yeah, don't click away just yet. There are 2 big things that we still need to do before we can finalize this video. And that is the fact that we're currently not following our own feed. So here we are logged in as me. I'm going to add a post. Just quickly go through that process. And now if we go to the timeline, where's my things? You know, why am I not seeing my posts? It's nowhere here. And that is because we will need to follow our own feed. It can't just automatically be assumed that you want to do that. So if you go to the app state file, in the connect method, we're going to have to do some additional things to follow our own feeds. We're going to add these 2 additional things, getters, current user feed and the current timeline feed. And what this does, it calls FlatFeed on the client to get the user and FlatFeed on the client to get the timeline. Okay, so it's just getting the 2 feeds that we already have. We're specifying the user ID as well. So who is currently logged in. And in the connect method, what we need to do now is after we authenticate, let's see, where's connect? So after we call connect over here, after we get the streamogram user, and before we call notify listeners, we will say await current timeline feed, follow the current user feed. So we're literally just following ourselves, and that's all we're doing. So now if we do a hot restart, log in, there we go. We can see that now we are following our own feed, and we can see the posts of our own user. And if we want to be egotistical, we can also like our own posts. So yeah, the last thing that we need to do is, as you can see, if we jump to these different locations in the page view, it's refreshing them. Like, why? It's like reloading everything. It's quite annoying. And that is because the page view destroys the widgets when you navigate to different pages. So we'll need a way to keep this stored locally, basically cache it. So if we go to our home screen, we'll need to add one last activity, widget. Scroll to the bottom and add a keep alive page stateful widget. What this does, it extends with AutomaticKeepAlive, and all this does is you can override to say that you want to keep this page alive. That's it. There may be better ways to do this using buckets. I'll leave that as an exercise to you, or maybe debate about it in the comments about what the best way to do this is. But what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this in a widget and just do that for all of them. And now, if we do a hot restart, log in, we should see that going to this page, first time it loads it as expected, but going back, it doesn't. So if we scroll down to like the middle of the page, go to here, go back, it kept the scroll position as well. And now our application is so much better for that. I think that is it. As I said, please feel free to ask for help in the comments. The YouTube comments, not these comments. I'm just gonna type that out. Please leave a comment. And we're gonna do a child reaction. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Hope I spelled everything correctly. I'm just gonna say fire, heart, praise. There you go, done. And then obviously like it. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something, and I hope you find stream feeds Flutter useful. Until the next video, cheers.